Hello and welcome to the Buy Social Canada Symposium. My name is Tori Williamson and I'm going to be your MC today. Our theme this year is Broad New Horizons. Now, more than ever, social procurement is growing in popularity and application across Canada. Today, we are going to explore diverse approaches to incorporating social value in purchasing, the key role community collaboration plays for success, best practices for implementation, the next frontier, a strong reporting and storytelling practice to showcase outcomes, and we're going to wrap up the day with a celebration of the Social Procurement Champion Awards. To start things off, I'd like to acknowledge the land that I'm joining you from. I respectfully acknowledge that I live, work, and learn on the unceded traditional and ancestral Squamish territory. I endeavor to make this more than just words and invite you to consider what it means to live on the traditional lands in your community and what efforts we can all take to repair and improve our relations with Indigenous people locally and globally. And as we speak today about supporting community goals, I really invite you to consider the land you are joining from, the people who have been there before you, and the people who will be on that land when we are no longer here. I'd like to say a thank you to our sponsors for today's event. So our two key sponsors are Chandos Construction and SAP, who are both Buy Social Pledge leaders. And what this means is that they are catalyzing the movement towards a social value marketplace by leading social procurement implementation across Canada. Both of these organizations have made specific commitments to social procurement within their organizations and with their purchasing. And we're going to get to hear from both of these organizations today at the Social Procurement Champion Awards. So thank you so much to Chandos and SAP. Now for some housekeeping. The platform that we're joining on today is AirMeet. And so if you haven't been here before, I'll just quickly run through some of the functions. At the top left corner of your screen, you'll see the people, messages, and your profile. If you click on the people, you can see everyone who's live on the platform right now. And if you select a name, then you can start a direct message with somebody. Under your profile, you can add your photos so that people can more easily see who you are. The second navigation bar has the chat for the session and the Q&A for the panels. If you have questions during the session that you'd like to direct to the panelists, please put them in the Q&A, and you can also upvote the questions that you want to prioritize. And I encourage you to chat and interact with each other in the chat section. If you want to hide that panel in order to have a larger screen of the speakers, you can click the down arrow there. There's also a fun thing that I really like about this platform is the reactions. So I think it's at the bottom of your screen. We all have slightly different views, but if you click that smiley face, you can click different reactions. And then you can also press on your keyboard the numbers 1 through 7 if you just want to quickly chime in some smiles or thumbs ups. Each number corresponds to a reaction. If you have any questions, you can click the question mark at the bottom right corner of your screen, and that will bring you to Airtable's support, AirMeet. Otherwise, you can also go into the people and direct message the Buy Social Canada host, Melissa, who is awesome and can help. So we want today to be interactive and educational. So the session should have lots of great information for you, but we also want you to connect and learn from each other. So there's these things called tables. When you arrived at the platform, you likely saw tables where you can click to join. And what these tables are is like a normal table, but it's virtual and allows you to sit and have a conversation over video or audio with people there. And you can switch between tables, and we'll have time in between the different sessions for you to chat and meet with people. We're going to have two short breaks in the morning or afternoon if you're on the East Coast, and then we'll have a longer lunch break. So you can direct message and coordinate with people if you want to make sure you have specific conversations. We've also designated some special tables way down below in the 20s, groups of 2. If you want to have one-on-one conversations with people, you can directly invite them to join you at a table, and also 3-person tables in the 30s. So I hope that gets you going if you want to connect with other people at the session. We're also going to have a couple of surprises in between panels today, so make sure you're tuned in and excited to connect. So enough from me. I'm happy to welcome to this stage for our first welcome conversation David LePage, Managing Partner from Social Canada, to have a fireside chat with Mollie Royds, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister of the Procurement Branch at Public Service and Procurement Canada, PSBC. Dare you to say that 5 times fast. Welcome.
Great. Thanks very much, Tori. It's really great to be joined by Mollie and by all of our colleagues at the symposium today. And I think, as Tori mentioned, we're really experiencing a really broad new horizons when it comes to social procurement. And when I reflect on some of the processes we've gone through and the journey, it was probably about 9 years ago when a colleague, friend from Public Service Procurement Canada, and I said, I really think the federal government should be doing social procurement. And he turned to me and he said, that would take 10 years. So here we are 9 years later, and we have the pleasure to be joined by Mollie to talk about how Public Service Procurement Canada and the federal government is actually moving forward. Mollie, you've got such a great background in procurement. You've experienced this from different perspectives in government, so we're really glad and lucky to have you. Um, can you kind of tell us a bit about what's this journey look like from inside government, from your perspective? How did we get here?
Great. Thank you very much, David. And first, let me just say thank you so much to you and to Social Canada for the invitation to be here today. I'm really thrilled to be here to speak with you at this symposium. As you've suggested, this has definitely been a journey for us, and it's one that we have been embarking on with all of you. So it's just really fabulous to be here to speak with you. I think that the themes that will be addressed today, including focusing on the outcomes that we are aiming to achieve, the impact, as well as to highlight those stories that Tori mentioned in the opening remarks. That's exactly what we're here to do. So, as you indicated, we have been on a journey at Public Services and Procurement Canada, or PSPC, as part of the government's overall commitment to social procurement, and specifically including our objectives to increase the diversity of our suppliers, as well as to achieve socioeconomic outcomes that are part of the government's priority. Critical to this journey has been our ongoing engagements and consultations. We have been, over the past number of years, engaged in numerous consultations with various communities. We've engaged formally through requests for information with specific communities and underrepresented groups to understand the types of issues that were important to them, as well as their experiences and knowledge with our procurement process. As I think is well known, Public Services and Procurement Canada is a common service provider, but we actually manage, on behalf of the government, approximately $24 billion in procurement annually. And we understand the power of that procurement to achieve socioeconomic outcomes, but we also understand the complexity of navigating the procurement process and working with government. So a critical component of our journey has been the experimentation that we have undertaken from a socioeconomic perspective. And that's included a cycle of experimentation that had, for instance, a Black business procurement pilot, which expanded procurement opportunities for Black entrepreneurs. We've also developed our Supplier Diversity Action Plan, which was launched in January, and that outlines concrete steps that the department is taking in support of our supplier diversity objectives. And critical to that, of course, is our social procurement policy, which I know we're going to talk a little bit more about as we get into our discussion, including some of its critical components. But what I think I would highlight here at this stage is simply, the elements of it, such as one of our core services, which is Procurement Assistance Canada, which has enhanced services to support the engagement of underrepresented groups and small businesses with our procurement system. So they have a wide-ranging range of services from outreach and education, but also a new coaching service for underrepresented groups who have had some experience with our procurement system, but perhaps not success to help achieve the outcomes that we are all looking for in terms of increasing the participation of underrepresented groups and outcomes from an economic perspective. It's in Canada's interests that we do that, and it's at the heart of our social procurement policy.
Thanks. It's fascinating to me, Molly, because when Buy Social Canada started looking at this quite a while ago, it was the realization that we were doing a lot of work with social enterprises and social purpose businesses, and they were on that sort of supply side of the market and trying to get more opportunities. And we started to look at, okay, what happens? And when you talk about $24 billion in buying, we thought, how do we capture some of that? And it's fascinating when we started our journey, we found a lot of government purchasing and corporate purchasing at that time was still around how do we get the lowest price? Now we've seen a real shift from lowest price to best value. Can you you talked about the social economic outcomes, et cetera. Can you get a bit more specific of what you think the influence of the federal government can be on the marketplace when you spend that much money?
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is one of the core elements of our social procurement policy, as well as our broader government procurement policy in terms of framing what we mean by best value, and the understanding that best value is more than lowest price. So, from a procurement perspective, we look at a range of elements as we define what we mean by best value. And for the government, that includes our socioeconomic objectives and outcomes, and other elements that are of a priority as we undertake a procurement. And again, this is one of our core elements of the social procurement policy. And from the perspective of what this means within government, and this is one thing I think I want to very much highlight for the participants of the symposium, is this is a massive change within the context of our procurement system and for our procurement officers, and that is something that from our perspective, ensuring that they have the tools that they need, the planning that is required as we embark on some of these procurements. You speak about $24 billion of procurement. That's a range of small low dollar value transactions of which we have large volume and therefore a high price. But there's also very large complex procurements that are undertaken within our portfolio, and being able to plan and to understand our market and to understand the supplier base is at the core of this. So, as we start to speak about what we mean by having a more broadened definition of best value, that has to go hand in hand with the planning and the tools, and also the engagement that we have with our market and with our supplier base. So, from our perspective, this is one of the core elements and one of the, I think, most significant changes that we are undertaking as we embark on social procurement, and specifically as we are beginning to develop our supplier diversity program, which is it's one of the major deliverables of our supplier diversity action plan, and will be released in the coming months, and is at the heart of our new minister's mandate as well. But again, this idea of a broadened definition of best value to include those socioeconomic outcomes, so that, because we again understand the power that we have within the marketplace for individual businesses and communities, and we want to ensure that we're having that actual impact that we're aiming to achieve, which is at the core of our program.
It, fascinating when you start to talk about the potential impact that you can have and just the influence on the market that that kind of buying can have. And now we've got a policy in place, and And a friend of mine a few weeks ago, when I said, "Look at this new federal policy, we've got social procurement in the federal government." And she said, "Wasn't that great? Now we're kind of done, right? We've crossed the hill." And I said, "No, we're just at one of those plateaus as you're on your way up the hill." Um, the big piece I see now is moving this policy to practice. And from your perspective, where do you see the challenges that we've got to? I think we're going to have to all work together to address those. But from your perspective, where are the challenges or the critical areas that we need to work on?
Right. Yeah. Thanks, David. And I think that you're capturing that very well in terms of, we have been through this period of experimentation, extensive consultation, and partnering, which is going to be very much, I think, at the core as we move into implementation, of our supplier diversity program. I think that, from a sort of the areas that I would highlight as being at the center of the engagements that we're doing right now, and the thinking that we're undertaking as we move into that implementation. First of all, I would highlight the issues surrounding data. We have recently moved to a new electronic procurement system, which I'm hoping some of you might be aware of, and we're happy to ensure that we provide the links to the community here. But we have recently launched Canada Buys as the single platform for doing business with the government of Canada from a procurement perspective. A key part of the Canada Buys platform is actually registration of our supplier base, because part of our social procurement policy is, of course, the importance of data collection. We talked earlier about the importance of ensuring we have the impact. Well, one of the key parts of ensuring we have the impact is actually understanding and having awareness of our supplier base and of opportunities so we can do the type of planning that I spoke to earlier. So I think one of the key challenges that we have moving forward is making sure that we're harnessing the data, but also making sure that we have that awareness and understanding. So one of our key pieces moving forward, we need to continue to sort of educate and spread the word about our new platform and about the importance of data, and the power of that to us moving forward. I think some of the other areas that I would highlight as things that we are looking at again is making sure that we have that outcome that we're desiring in the communities that we're seeking to have that impact in. So one of the pieces that we have been in extensive discussions with the various communities is understanding issues around certification and validation of our supplier base in terms of understanding the participation of underrepresented groups, how that would be form part of our program. And so that's an area that we continue to engage in discussion on to make sure that we have the impact, as well as ensuring that we are not increasing barriers for participation in procurement. Because again, we talk about that $24 billion of procurement and the amount of procurement we do with federal departments across the government. And, certainly it is a complex system and we understand that. So I think that for us, making sure that we are addressing those barriers and engaging in those consultations so that we can do our part in ensuring that our program is as successful as possible and having those impacts in increasing the participation of underrepresented groups and in achieving those socioeconomic outcomes that we've talked about through this conversation.
Great. Molly, it's very short. Thank you so much. I know you've got a busy schedule. You've got, the house is sitting and everything. Before you leave, any final words of encouragement, or what can the participants in the symposium do to help move this forward? I mean, how do we do that?
So thank you so much. Again, I've been really happy to be here today to speak with you. And I think this event is just another great example of what we can do in terms of encouraging the discussions, engagements. So what I would ask again is if we could spread the word in terms of the importance of registering on Canada Buys. I invite you to engage with us. Procurement Assistance Canada has outreach and regional offices across Canada who are waiting to hear from you. We will continue on this journey. We want to hear from our suppliers. We want to hear from organizations like yours and other communities on what we can do to be successful. Again, I think we all are on this journey together in terms of ensuring those outcomes, and we want to share our success stories as well with you. So just I thank again by Social Canada and all of you here for being part of this great discussion. And certainly at PSPC, we're really excited to be doing our part and to be launching our supplier diversity program and continuing to implement our social procurement program. So thanks again, David, and to the organizers and all of you. And I wish you luck in your symposium today.
Great. Thanks, Mollie. Great to have you.
Thank you.
So one of the things that Mollie mentioned and we talked about was so important to getting where we are today was collaboration and co-creation of these efforts. So now I want to welcome our first discussion panel today and welcome on stage Breannah Flynn from First Light, Michelle Lackie from Exchange Intercity, and Jonathan Hildebrand from the city of Winnipeg. So we have uh, Breannah from as far east as can go, and we have Michelle from the west coast, and Jonathan joining us from the middle of the country in Winnipeg. So we tried to do as much diversity as we can. But I think it would be really good before we get into a conversation. Can each of you? I mean, I don't want to just read bios. That's so boring. I hate when you go and you have like someone just like, oh, and Jonathan done it. So why don't we? I'm going to ask you each to take just 15 or 30 seconds, really quick, a minute maximum. Like, why are you involved in social procurement? What are you doing and who are you? So our participants in the symposium get an idea of who's on the panel today. So do you want to start, Breannah? You're as far away from me as we can get.
Sure. So hello, everybody. My name is Breannah Flynn. I'm the Director of Business Operations at First Light in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. So First Light is a member of the National Association of Friendship Centers, which is a network of urban Indigenous service delivery organizations. I've worked with the organization for a little over 10 years, and I've spent the majority of that time developing the social enterprise branch of the organization. So I'm really excited to participate in this discussion today because social procurement is an area that we've been in for a little while, but is certainly sort of a tool that we look forward to leveraging to scale a lot of our social enterprises in the next several years. So thanks for having me. I'm excited for the discussion.
Great. Let's move to the middle of the country. Jonathan?
Hi, I'm Jonathan Hildebrand. I'm the manager of strategic planning at the city of Winnipeg, and I work in the office of the chief administrative officer. I'm representing a municipality and I'm sort of representing the purchaser side. The city of Winnipeg, we procure about $400 million worth of goods and services in any given year, so significantly smaller than Mollie's $24 billion, but certainly nothing to sneeze at. And I exist sort of as a bit of a lone wolf in the CAO's office, and everything that I sort of achieve is done in a collaborative manner. So I am measured by my success to the extent that I can get people aligned and get people unstuck and move things forward.
And Michelle, I think you're right down the street from me today.
I am. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Lackie. I'm the Executive Director of Exchange Intercity, and we are a community economic development organization that focuses on working collectively with communities in the downtown east side to create a more inclusive and equitable economy for everyone, regardless of their background. And I'm really happy to be here today because I just think that social procurement can have so much impact without changing. With it, looking back at what Mollie said about value, it's just expanding the understanding of value, and just the impact that we're able to have is huge.
So, Michelle, can you're with Exchange Inner City, and I want to get an idea from each of you how collaboration and co-creation is so fundamental to how you see where we are with social procurement and where you see the future of social procurement. What's been like an experience, maybe a story you could share or something on how collaboration and co-creation has gotten us to where we are and where it might go. So, Michelle, do you want to start?
Sure. There's probably a lot that I could share about co-creation and collaboration. I think what's really important, though, is that, especially from kind of the middle ground, right? We're in between both Breannah and Jonathan in terms of the type of work we do. That what's really important is that we're always looking and collaborating with the city, as an example, on the procurement side, to ensure things are accessible to the social enterprises, what they can access and what they can't. And, one really successful example, I'd say, is this city, and the city is just an example, but the city was looking at graffiti removal, and they had a really large contract. But what they were able to do was say, here's a graffiti removal company that can do a large contract, but we're going to ensure that a percentage of what that company does has to be outsourced to a social enterprise who can also do graffiti removal. And it worked. The social enterprise got a smaller contract that they could work on, and also helps them build capacity. And the larger company got the larger contract. And that only worked because we're able to connect city and business and social enterprise.
Jonathan, you said you're the lone wolf in the municipality, but then you said collaboration is essential. So how do you, can you give us a story of, or an example of where playing that role in administration brought about social procurement success through collaboration?
Yeah, for sure. So the city of Winnipeg has been in a process of developing its sustainable procurement program for many, many, many years. And it was just in the last couple of years where council asked administration to start to prepare both a sustainable procurement framework as well as a social procurement action plan. And it was at that point where we had to take what we had been doing over the last several years and roll it up together to bring in the social and Indigenous pillars of the program. And it required a significant amount of collaboration and co-creation with a host of different intermediaries as well as social enterprises. And at the city, we got a bit stuck at one point, and it required us to sit back and not only assess the different tools that we were using by way of collaboration and co-creation, but it really required us to make sure that everybody sort of felt like those tools were being used and that they felt like it was true co-creation. And when we were able to get over that hump, we were able earlier this year to pass and adopt as a council both a framework and an action plan within sort of 6 months of each other. And it was really quite an incredible thing to be a part of, for sure.
Breannah, you're the social enterprise here. You're on the supply side. What's an example of where collaboration and co-creation really helped you move that social procurement needle?
Sure. So one of our longest running social enterprises is our medical transportation service. So we have a fleet of 4 vehicles and a team of drivers who are supported by dispatch and coordination positions that provide physical navigation to Indigenous medical clients that are traveling to the city from rural and remote communities. So we've been competing against the local taxi industry for many years to provide a service that's more tailored to the needs of this clientele, and also providing the organization with the opportunity to employ Indigenous people who may face barriers to employment. We can provide wraparound services in reference to navigation. So if we see clients who can benefit from translation services or cultural supports, then we can connect them with other departments within the organization, in addition to providing a service that appreciates the added challenge of traveling to the capital city for medical appointments. So we're able to express cultural humility in a manner that we feel our competitors just can't. So we've been collaborating with two of our largest partners, Indigenous Services Canada and the Nunavut government, for many years, to ensure that we remain competitive by requesting that policies leave room for them to select us even if we're not the low bid. So to ensure that the added value of the social component of our business is recognized in their evaluations. So one of the things that we do is meet regularly with those partners and review analytics, and we've invested significantly in the way that we track usage and travel patterns, which benefit both our business and also our partners tremendously. And that's something that we know our competitors couldn't provide at this level. So ongoing dialogue and relationship building, I think, has been one of the most critical pieces of our social procurement journey.
That's great. I just want to remind people we're going to have time for questions. And if you go to the Q&A, you can put a question in. We're going to have time at the end of the panel before we let the panel go away for some questions from the participants. So if you want to put those in, don't hesitate. We'll be getting to those in a few minutes after we have our conversation. It's fascinating to me, Breannah, that you talk about that partnership. And when I look at the three of you on this panel, it's sort of like the ecosystem of social procurement. You got Jonathan as a buyer and you as a supplier, and Michelle being the intermediary to make sure you're talking and dialoguing together. It's always fascinating to me because we often take our own perspective when we look at these issues, like what are we getting or what do we need? How do you perceive, and Breannah, why don't you start, because you talked about those partnerships and that need to dialogue with the other sectors. When you think about moving social procurement forward, how do you see the role of the intermediary and the purchaser supporting social enterprise to be successful?
From a purchasing perspective, I think it's really encouraging to see a shift in the attitudes of those that make procurement decisions. But in the same breath, that shift is taking some significant time. So, for example, the partners that I mentioned earlier, they're still deploying a largely traditional procurement process, but some slight adjustments have been made to reflect the relationship that we've built over the many years. But they've not implemented full-blown social procurement policies. So we're always still really concerned that if there are people who lead departments who we've built relationships with, that those opportunities could go away during the next round of bidding. So having people that are in positions of power make the changes to policy that sort of protect the nature of that business relationship is really important to the long-term success of the social enterprises that are competing in this space. And then when we talk about intermediaries and supporting agencies, we've really appreciated being connected to networks that sort of have their finger on the pulse of social procurement. So networks like the Newfoundland and Labrador Social Enterprise Coalition, which we're a part of, the National Association of Friendship Centers, by Social Canada. It just allows us to better keep up with the changing landscape of the sector. We're now sort of starting to reposition our social enterprises to make sure that we're prepared for the opportunities that social procurement can present. So we know that using our social value propositions to speak with potential purchasers in a way that articulates the benefits of working with us versus suppliers that they've been working with for years is going to be a critical part of scaling our enterprises in the future. So we recently scaled our transportation service to include short-term accommodations specifically for Indigenous medical clients. And so the Lunar Inn is our first by Social Canada certified social enterprise. So even having a set of standards that we could work toward in this sector, I think is really important in the development stage, because it makes sure that you're thinking about things that you're not haven't always been considered necessary when your services are targeted at a clientele that you serve as part of your nonprofit mandate. So it really just encourages you to present yourself as a business that's delivering services at the same caliber as your competitors, and having groups and networks who can sort of communicate what that standard is and provide resources and tools that help you to meet that standard has been, I think, a really important part of our success.
Great. Jonathan, you mentioned in your remarks about the importance of that collaboration and co-creation that happened. How, the municipality has like budgets, you have politics and policy. How do you see the role of intermediaries and suppliers supporting the efforts of the city to move forward on your social procurement program?
So on two fronts, and it goes back to some of the comments that were made earlier on in the session about storytelling, and that one point of inflection between cost and price versus value. At the city and at the municipal and at the government level, we need the intermediaries, and we need the social enterprises to be telling that story about how you need to be thinking about the value as opposed to just the cost. If you leave that story untold and you leave that up to municipalities to tell, we get very frustrated with our council, and our council gets really frustrated with us, because when we tried to make that case, when we tried to tell that story, they see it as us wasting money and not paying attention to costs and not paying attention to the taxpayer. But when a social enterprise or an intermediary is able to come in and tell that story, you're able to do it much more effectively than we can administratively and bureaucratically. And that absolutely fills an incredibly important gap. And it also helps to maintain overall momentum towards integrating and getting a program in place. So hopefully that helps.
So, Michelle, you're the intermediary here. So you've got Breannah looking for opportunities and saying, buy more from us as a social enterprise. Here's the value proposition. You've got Jonathan as the buyer saying, I've got all these pressures. I've got, budgets. I've got politicians. I've got all kinds of things. You come along as the intermediary, like Exchange Intercity in Vancouver, and you say, come on, guys, let's figure this out. So you're a facilitator, but you're also an advocate. So how do you see the role of the other two sides to make the success you want to see happen?
It's a great question. I mean, part of it is just that the suppliers like Breannah's and others, they know what they're able to offer, right? They know what they can offer. They also know what the challenges are. So, from that perspective, it's really important for us to have the relationships with the social enterprises to best understand what they're offering, and also what are the barriers along the way, because then we can help translate that individually, but also on a larger scale. And for the purchasers, I mean, it's the same thing, right? The purchasers know what they're looking for. So if they can articulate that, and if we can help them articulate that in some form, then we can help make the connection. But if the purchasers, if they need to know what they're looking for, that's really important, and what their barriers are, because then we can help between the different ones overcome those barriers. So, we have the Vancouver Social Procurement Roundtable, which we host in partnership with Buy Social Canada, and it brings together suppliers and purchasers so that they can actually do the connections they need. I think the other thing that's really important from a purchasing side is whether it's through the city or a business, that the staff of those places, that they are the ones who are the advocates and the implementers. And that piece is incredibly important to ensure that all of this will really happen. So if it's on the city side, then we have, the staff who are really implementing, but it's also the council who are the advocates and accountability, making sure it happens. And if we're talking about business, you need that person, on the purchasing side to say, like, this is really important. We'll feed you, the social enterprises will give you the stories of impact, but we need that person on the inside to also help make this happen.
So you're kind of a dialogue manager.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
So for me to host this is really kind of great because I've had the chance to work with each of you in different times, in different ways. And I really have to say I admire all the work all three of you have done. I mean, dramatic shifts. I mean, Breannah, watching what's happened in St. John's with the Friendship Center and your development of the building and the services. Jonathan, to see the movement in Winnipeg from we got an idea, let's make it happen, and now it's happening. And Michelle, the opportunity to work with you to see how things like social procurement and community benefit agreements are moving in the city, and a lot of it because of the advocacy work of Exchange Intercity. So I've had that opportunity to learn from each of you and see that. But from your perspective, would you take a couple minutes and share with the participants today what your key learnings have been on that journey and some advice? Because I think we're all, as Mollie and I were talking about, some things are moving, but we have a long way to go. So where do you see the successes? But what the advice you would all of us moving forward when we continue? Jonathan, why don't you start this one?
Yeah, for sure. So two words come to mind. Approach it with a healthy dose of patience and a healthy dose of humility. And from my perspective and the city of Winnipeg's perspective, when I reflect on the journey that we've been on with respect to social procurement, don't be afraid to sit back and identify a need to recalibrate and reset and to search out and ask for help to get unstuck. Inevitably, you're probably going to get stuck somewhere in the trajectory, but recognizing that you need something that will recalibrate and reset the table to keep it going is something that can actually pay significant dividends down the line. So always be patient. It takes time. And when you're trying to do true co-creation and collaboration, there has to be humility around the table. Otherwise, it can get really difficult.
Breannah, some advice and learnings?
Sure. So we operate our social enterprises within a nonprofit organization. And that has some pros and cons. One of the challenges can be sort of establishing that legitimacy of your business when it comes to public perception. So ensuring that you stay true to the values of the organization and present those as key to your success can help to differentiate you from your competitors. So a lot of what Jonathan talked about earlier, when we first entered the world of social enterprise, we had a lot of work to do with our board of directors to sort of convince them to take on the risk associated with operating in the business space. So early on, our biggest focus was sustainability. So the business models for most of our mature enterprises are very sound, but we took for granted the added social, emotional, and cultural components of how we were delivering the services associated with those businesses. And we sort of assumed that people would just get that part of things. So I think one of the key learnings for us has been making sure that you don't assume people know about the added social impact of doing business with you, and be explicit, share your success, share your impact, capture information that's relevant to your potential partners and your clientele, and share it often. People do generally want to be connected to enterprises that create social capital. So when we give them the story and the information, it allows them to be our greatest spokespeople and advocates. And I think that's the way that social procurement is going to gain momentum. Having the purchaser want to be a part of your story, and when you build those relationships, they can become your greatest asset.
Michelle.
I have 3 things. One, it's really important to think from the purchasing side about accessibility. So if you are doing social procurement and you have an RFP or a contract that you're putting out, etc., you might have excellent ideas and values of what you want to do with social procurement, but if it's not accessible, then it's really hard to be successful. So think about, there are many times that huge, decent size, whatever companies will try and get a contract with you, and they have someone who's focused purely on RFPs and responding. Often social enterprises and small social impact businesses do not have that. They don't have that capacity. So it's a lot harder for them to do that. So think about, sometimes you actually have to make a tweak to make that possible. The second thing is, it's really important to invest in suppliers. So often when businesses start, they have a lot of different access to supports to kind of build them up. And social enterprises, sometimes they need a community investment. They need investment in lots of different ways. Some of that is just knowing that they're going to get the next contract, because then that helps build their capacity. Sometimes that's financial infusion. Sometimes that's just mentorship, consulting, etc. So investing in suppliers is incredibly important. It doesn't just happen on its own. And the third, and it kind of harkens back to something David and Mollie said, but is really important, that policy is excellent, and congratulations for passing a policy, but policy doesn't equal implementation. And the hard work continues in ensuring that we're implementing what we set out to do. And to do that, it's kind of what Jonathan was saying, that we need to be open to dialogue. And not from a defensive place or a you did this right or wrong, etc., but from a how are we actually trying to achieve this together so that we can meet the goals that we set out to do. And that's purely through dialogue and relationship and collaboration.
Jonathan, you mentioned humility as being one of the primary things that we need to do to make the ecosystem for social procurement go through. And we talked about persistence, and we talked about policy to practice. And all of you talked about some of the things you've had to work on. I don't think we often take the opportunity to share, and Breannah, you got there almost. You started talking about stories. Can each of you take a couple minutes and share like a success story, like what went into it, and why did your team then sit down and say, I think this is a champagne moment? So is there someone want to start this one? What comes to mind? Got all of you smiling, at least. It's like someone who wants to tell the first success story.
Our success story.
Oh, Jonathan, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. Our success story was earlier this year in January, passing a framework for our sustainable procurement program and our social procurement framework. It was the first time we've ever done that at the City of Winnipeg, and that did lead into later in the summer passing an action plan. So this is further to what Michelle was saying. We had the framework, and we sort of popped the cork, and everybody was like, "Hooray!" But that's only a framework, right? That doesn't do anything per se. The grunt work comes with the implementation and the action. So we were able to celebrate again in July when we passed the action plan. But it doesn't stop, as similar to what Michelle says, it doesn't stop at that point. In the corporate office, right, when you are able to get those things going and you see your executive policy committee and your council pass them, you sort of think, oh, this is great. But then there's further what David said, that's just a plateau on the trek up the mountain. So you gotta keep those social enterprises and those intermediaries that were with you at those champagne moments. You have to keep them engaged, and then you have to be and remain committed to following through on all the actions that are necessary.
Breannah, a good success story. You're muted.
Sorry, I was just thinking that, we pop the champagne anytime a contract is renewed or we win a bid. So trying to think outside of that. But during the pandemic, I think we actually realized how we've built resilience and agility into our businesses in a way that we weren't really paying attention before. So the way that we were able to maintain, every single staff person that we had employed by social enterprise during that time, pivot our business models, prioritize the health and safety of our employees and at the same time our clients as well, and work with our partners to determine how their needs changed during the pandemic and what we could do to continue to serve them. I think that was a huge boost to our businesses, and it gave us sort of a different perspective that we would not have had we all been sort of forced to operate in a different way. So I think coming out of that, while extremely challenging, it tested our businesses in new ways and also opened up a door, a whole new world of opportunity. So I would certainly say that just coming out of that time with all of our businesses still operating, everyone's still employed, and in a lot of ways, new opportunities, that we hadn't thought about before, that was a huge success for us.
Michelle.
Sure. So I think a somewhat recent success for us was we hosted an event, which doesn't sound like that would be a success. It's so important, but we hosted an event where we brought together the city, so staff, mayor, council members. We brought together businesses, social enterprises, nonprofit organizations, other allies, etc., because we brought them together to create this kind of constituency that would say, like, this is really important. Social procurement, community economic development, understanding value is about dollar, and social impact, etc. And that in and of itself was actually a great success because it created a lot of momentum. But more importantly, because it's about action, is the connections that happened because of that event. So whether it was another company going and saying, oh, we saw the caterers that you used, your social enterprise caterers that you used at this event, we actually are now going to, we then went ahead and got catering from them. And we will continue to get catering only from social enterprises. That was kind of one. Another one was another, we have the city of Vancouver, we have Metro Vancouver, somebody from the city of Vancouver council, I think I can say this, kind of turning to Metro Vancouver and saying, hey, what's your social procurement policy? And so now they're thinking about social procurement policy and what does that equal? So it's, Breannah said that everyone wants to be part of social impact, and that's how we're going to create change. And so it's sometimes getting out of our bubble and bringing others in and inviting and asking. That I think we're still seeing the dividends and still building upon it.
But I think that's a fascinating role of you talking about catalyzing those relationships, right, between suppliers and purchasers. And I think we're learning about that relationship building. Just a reminder, we've got a few minutes left. If anyone does have a question, pop it into the Q&A. The theme for today's symposium is New Horizons. Kind of when we were talking about it on the staff, the whole idea of like, where are we in this process? And like when Mollie and I were talking and people are saying, oh, we've got these policies now. And as you just said, Michelle, that, policy and practice, long way. Jonathan, same thing. Breannah, same thing. But if we think about this from a perspective as what we're on a new horizon, we're on the next part of the journey. Are you hopeful? and where do you see the potential growth? Breannah, do you want to start?
Sure. Definitely hopeful. It's interesting because I actually met with someone locally about the efforts being made by PSPC here in St. John's last week. And they talked a lot about the efforts being made by the federal government to purchase from Indigenous businesses, which is really exciting. Now, there's some challenges with that because, we left that meeting with a list of areas that we need to register for and boxes that we need to tick and all of these sorts of things. But it's exciting to have someone who you can connect with to help navigate those sorts of new spaces. So it certainly is really exciting. There's a lot of questions. I think sometimes for us all the way out here on the East Coast is trying to figure out how some of those new programs translate regionally and what can we do to hold our governments accountable to some of those targets. So, we know a lot of that procurement spending happens in some of the larger provinces. So how do we ensure, as a set of Indigenous businesses here in St. John's, how do we have equal access and opportunity when it comes to some of that procurement opportunity? So I think the discussions are really exciting. Seeing the investment, at the local level is really important as well, knowing that we'll have support navigating some of those new spaces for us. So it really is exciting to hear some of Mollie's remarks today.
Jonathan, you've put a lot of effort, made some steps, you're on some plateaus, you're still going up. Are you hopeful that the mountain's still achievable?
Oh, completely. I think that New Horizon theme is absolutely spot on. I do think if you step back and you look from 10,000 feet, the debate has now moved into that sort of realm where it's assumed that what we're talking about is true. And you're not having to convince people as often and as readily that there's a benefit overall to the community and the people that we're trying to work with, that there's a benefit there. There's already that hump is, we've gotten over that hump. And once you get over that, you're able to more effectively move the needle in a shorter period of time. So absolutely, there's a new horizon here. I think absolutely people are generally, for the most part, understanding what the value proposition is with the work that we're doing. And I think there's nothing but a feeling of hope that's coming from that for sure.
Michelle, how are you? Hopeful today or fearful?
I'm a little mix of both. I feel like I shouldn't be last, but I'll stick with the hopeful. I think a lot of groundwork has been laid, and I think that we can build on it. And I'm also really excited about what the social enterprises are doing. It's really incredible the work that they're able to achieve and the impact that they're having. I'm also really hopeful by some of the kind of the businesses or the anchor institutions or anchor type institutions and their commitment that I'm seeing to say like social procurement is important, and we are like SFU, right? Like they're here and some part of them is in the downtown east side, and they're committing to different types of social procurement. And so that to me is what we need to see on both the big level, like the institutional level, and also the small businesses also can do this. They can think of, we all have spending. So where am I doing my spending? I can do it. We need to do the same thing. And so in that sense, I'm really hopeful and excited. And it takes work. That's all I'll say.
So we only have a minute left. So I'm going to ask you, someone just added a thank you to all of you in the Q&A. So my thank you, but I'll let you, Michelle, take the next thing, and just a word of advice to everybody. What should we be doing next in terms of moving on the horizon?
Yeah, I think what you can do next is actually what I just said. So for everyone here, even on a simple level, look at your organization, your business, et cetera, what is your spending? Where are you doing it? And what's a small change that you can make? There's the policy side and the framework and the et cetera, but there's also small things that you can do. Start there or continue working there.
Jonathan, quickly, last word of advice.
Michelle's bang on, and that's sort of where the city of Winnipeg is starting. We're starting with those small things and trying to get the quick wins, and absolutely, that's absolutely spot on. Yeah.
Breannah, you get the last word.
Yeah, for us, it's just better understanding that procurement space, figuring out where the spending is happening, and looking at some of what you're already providing and how you can pivot it to be competitive in those spaces. So a lot of learning to happen, but looking forward to doing it with, lots of organizations who have the support and the resources there to help us out.
Great. I want to thank the three of you for joining us. To kind of set the tone for the day. So this is really great to look at the ecosystem and to look at it from your perspective. So thank you so much. You guys do so much work, and we just appreciate what you do out in the community. It's just great. So we're going to take a short 10-minute break now, and then we'll be back with our next panel. So thanks, everybody. If you want to, be sure to go visit a table, have a chance in the break if you need to take a little break on your own, but also take a few minutes to join a table and have a conversation with colleagues from across the country. So again, thank you to everybody. Thanks, Mollie, Michelle, Breannah, and Jonathan.